Our City Live here in Keene, New Hampshire. We're at Knights of Columbus. I'm Bo Drake Deese here with Ray Bentley. Ray, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Bo. Great to be here.
Good to meet you. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about your career, and I'm just going to ask you a couple questions, stuff like that. So, we're going to start with you going to college. Now, obviously, you play football in college because you got to the pros, and that kind of speaks for itself. But a lot of things that people don't get to hear about is what football players and athletes in college do mostly off the field. So when you think about your college experience off the field, what was that like for you?
I don't know. I was pretty drunk. I don't remember. No, seriously, I was fortunate up at Central Michigan, in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. There was rivers that we would go canoeing on or inner tubing on. There was a place called the Spillway. There was a lake that had a spillway that we would slide down on inner tube. There was so much stuff to do.
Yeah.
Basically, very similar to New Hampshire now that I live here. So finding something to do was never an issue.
Right.
There's always the guys around. Somebody's always got something going. So I kept myself pretty busy.
That's good. When you were in school, what kind of academic classes were you taking?
Started out as a journalism major, and my first journalism class, I hated it. It was kind of post-Watergate, and it was a time where journalism was really muckraking. They were trying to get the dirt on people, and I kind of thought about it, and I'm like, God, I'm the last guy to be digging up dirt on someone else. I got my own piles of dirt. So I switched over to English, and that is where I found a home. I'd always been interested in writing, and it kind of dovetailed perfectly. I had a couple of great professors that taught me how to write and how to write properly, and so that's really, other than majoring in eligibility my first couple of years just to play football, I finally settled on English.
What aspects of English do you feel that you enjoyed the most, like poetry or just writing long essays or something like that?
I love a great novel.
Okay.
But I also love it when I write a tight sentence where, I've got everything knocked in line perfectly. To me, that's a very rewarding thing, and I get a thrill out of that.
Right.
I guess that's why I still write.
That makes sense. So now, switching over to football, what was that first day of practice like for you? You're a high school kid, and you finally get to this big place where you can play football. What's that like? I
was scared to death, to be honest with you, but I wouldn't let anybody know it.
Right.
That was one thing. So I got through it with a lot of bravado. But what I found out right away was that I belonged. I wasn't getting massacred. There were bigger, older guys who knew more than me. But when it came to sticking my face in there, I got results, and so that builds confidence.
Right.
So I guess a lot of people would have probably characterized me as cocky my first day, but I didn't feel that way inside.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to put a face on and walk out there and make it happen.
Fake it till you make it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, were there days when you were at practice for football and you're just like, oh my God, I can't go on, I can't do this, I don't want to do this?
About every other day, probably. No, it gets tiresome, it gets boring at times, because it's no different than anything else. The devil is in the details, and the little things, and the better and more proficient you become at those, the bigger picture takes care of itself. And that's, I think, as collectively, as a team, and then individually, I think we each had to learn that and recognize what our parts in the big picture were, and then make sure we got those done before we worried about doing someone else's job. Any organization I've been successful with or in that's been successful, that's how they do their business.
Who are some of your teammates on your college team who helped you be successful, or coaches who helped you be successful?
My head coach was Herb Duramity, and he's still like a father to me to this day. The most honest man with more integrity than anybody I've ever met. And that meant a lot to me. You hear all these stories about colleges and the cheating and the things that go on. Not at Central Michigan. We did things the right way. And then there were several upperclassmen that took me under their wing. Gary Hogeboom, who played 10, 12 years in the NFL, was a quarterback for the Cowboys for a little bit. He was a senior when I was a freshman, and we came from the same hometown. And so Gary really went out of his way to help me out and make sure I knew what line to get in and what pitfalls to avoid.
Right. So then, you've got football, and then you've got school. As a serious football player in Division I school, how do you find the nice balance between doing football and also finding a way to do your education stuff?
It can be tricky.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, early on, I wasn't very good at it. I like to go. Lo and behold, they had a girls' dorm right next to ours, and I always found myself over there.
Wonder how that happened, right?
Yeah, right. I don't know, but eventually I figured it out, and I would say from my sophomore year on, I was able to get my work done, and schoolwork generally came pretty easy to me, although some of them college classes wasn't the case. But I stayed at it. You just learn how to, I guess, spend your time. You know, you got to get stuff done before you can go out and play. Which, guys, they had been telling me that for a long time.
Yeah.
And it finally sunk in.
Yeah. What were some of those classes that gave you a harder time than others?
I had a chemistry class, and it was all Greek to me, right? But I was sitting in the class. My wife was on one side, and a close friend of hers from high school was on the other side.
Yeah.
I got a better grade than both of them. I don't know how to explain that, and I don't know a thing about chemistry. So you find ways to get through.
Yeah. So then, you go through your college career. How did you end up on the Buffalo Bills, starting your NFL career?
Yeah, you know, I played in the USFL prior to that. I left school early, in fact, to do so. It was a spring league that started in 1983, and I went with the Michigan Panthers, and we won the title that first year. The league, however, in 1986 sued the NFL and tried to compete with them head-to-head by moving the season to the fall.
Okay.
Well, they won the lawsuit, but they only got awarded $1 in damages, which they triple it because it was antitrust, so now it's $3.
Okay.
That wasn't going to pay for a whole lot for a lot of all these guys that were trying to make the jump. So I ended up being a free agent, and I got signed by Tampa Bay, and I lasted 2 weeks there, and they cut me in the final cut. The coach at Buffalo at the time, Hank Bulla, had been my father's freshman coach at Michigan State back in 1960 in football. So I had a connection there, and we called him, and he said he wanted to get me into Buffalo, but he didn't have a roster spot, a numbers game at that point.
Right.
2 weeks later, he signed me, and so that was week 3 in 1986, and I stayed with Buffalo from then through the end of the '91 season. Super Bowl 26 against Washington was my last game of the Bills.
Okay. So you said your father played professional football?
Well, he played semi-professional, I should say. He played collegiately at Michigan State.
Okay. How much of a influence or an inspiration was that to you for your football career?
That was huge. You know, football was. I was born into it. You know, my dad coached throughout my entire life, played semi-pro ball. You know, we were born. He was 18 years old yet. Him and my mother got married, and he went off to college. And so we were around. We lived on the Michigan State campus and hung out with the football team, and you know, so I was immersed in it from the get-go. I had no chance. And then at that time, they didn't let you play until you were 8 years old. But my dad knew the coach of this Rocket or Pop Warner football team, whatever you want to call it. And my brother and I have a twin brother. We were 7, and he smuggled us into the league a year early. So I got started a year early and loved it. You know, from the first day I put the pads on and started running around, I felt like I was home.
Did you always play linebacker, or were you playing other positions when you were first starting out?
Well, when you're young, they let you play both sides of the ball. So I was a quarterback. Well, initially I was a running back, and then in 8th grade they moved me to quarterback, and I was an all-state quarterback in high school, and then all-state linebacker as well. But I decided to play linebacker because I had figured it out that it was a lot better hitting people than getting hit by people. So that was a pretty easy decision.
Yeah, it's always nicer to be on the other end of the stick.
Yeah, right?
So moving back to the Bills, we always hear professional athletes talking about the difference between, you know, Division I college playing and professional playing. What is the actual, from your perspective, what's the actual difference between a college player and a professional player?
It's night and day.
Yeah.
It really is. There was a big jump from high school to college, but it doesn't compare to the jump that you make from college to the pros, because even in college, they've got great guys at every position, but they don't have the best guy in your conference at every position.
Right.
And that's kind of what the NFL is. It's the best of the best, and then them boys are playing for keeps. So it's a different world.
Talk about your first game as a Buffalo Bill. You're in this huge NFL stadium, and then you finally get to go out and play on that field. What's that like?
God, I hardly slept the night before. I remember it like it was yesterday. And they had me, I wasn't playing any defense yet, but they had me on the special teams, and they made me the old wedge buster, which is no longer a position. They don't let you wedge block on these kickoff returns. It's too dangerous.
Right.
I wish I'd have known back then, right? So I came flying down the field, and my feet barely touched the ground. We were playing the St. Louis Cardinals. This is before St. Louis moved to Arizona.
Okay.
And they had a couple guys. Vi Sikahema was returning kicks, and he was an all-pro kick returner. And then they had another kid, that Ron Wolfley, who was a all-pro special teams guy. They always name one guy, and he was the hardest hitting special teams guy in the league, and he was from Orchard Park, New York, which is where we were playing the game. So he has come back home. He wanted to show his family and friends that he still had it. And so I'm running down that field, I'm covering that kick, and I'm like, oh my God, no one's blocking me. I'm going to get this guy for a big tackle. This is going to be awesome. And all of a sudden, I see a blur out of the corner of my eye. Whack! Wolfley hit me, man, blindsided me. I rolled over twice and somehow popped up to my feet. And Sikahema had actually been bottled in, and he reversed the field, because I had got knocked from midfield literally almost to the sideline. I went flying that far. But I popped back up on my feet, and I'm seeing double, and there's two Vi Sikahemas coming at me. So I just dove and flipped one of the 4 feet I saw, and fortunately it was his, and I ended up making a touchdown saving tackle. Wolfley, he gave himself a concussion. He hit me so hard.
Oh my God.
They took his helmet away, and he sat on the bench the rest of the day. They brought me into the locker room. I had a grade 2 separation of my left shoulder.
Wow.
They shot it up with a little Novocaine to deaden it, and then I went out and covered kicks the rest of the afternoon. So welcome to the NFL. That was my very first play.
Oh my goodness.
So I kind of expected it'd be rough, but I didn't expect that.
Wow. What a way to kick it off.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
I found out what I was getting into, that's for sure.
So, you talk about, was that the hardest you've ever been hit in the NFL?
It's close. There were a couple times when we played the Redskins in Super Bowl 26, our defensive line coach, before the game, shot his mouth off and said terrible things about their offensive line. Why he would stir them up and make them angry at us, I have no idea. He got fired shortly thereafter the game.
Well, there you go.
But those guys were trying to kill us, and they did. I mean, they ran the counter tray where they'd pull the backside guard and tackle around the front side, and they had some big boys, 340, 50 pounds, that could move. And when one of them hit you in the ear hole, yeah, that wasn't good.
No,
I got knocked ass over tea kettle. I can't tell you how many times in that game. And it didn't help that I pulled my quad covering the opening kickoff, so I was at about 70% anyway.
That probably doesn't help.
Nah. So I don't ever want to see that game again, and I hate the Hogs.
So, on the flip side, what's the hardest you've ever hit someone? Let you recover from that one.
There's a couple, man. I used to be the kickoff guy in high school, and nobody ever blocked the kicker in their schemes.
Right.
Well, until they scouted us, because I would kick the ball and then take off like a shot, and nobody would ever block me. I myrtleized a couple of kids. I hit one kid so far he flew under the bench and was out cold, and they had to stop the game and call the ambulance in and all that stuff. Thank God he was all right.
Oh man.
But I would say that was my hardest hit in high school. In college, the official made a call on me for a late hit, and it was a bad call. And I was incensed, and I couldn't go after him, unfortunately. So I channeled my anger at the opponents, and I knew when they came out of the huddle, I saw the running back's eyes. I knew exactly what they were doing. So I ignored my responsibility, shot the gap, and I hit the kid so hard that the whole place was silent. They weren't sure if he was going to get up. And he did, but he never played football again. I felt bad about that. I hurt my shoulder a little bit.
Oh, man.
That was the fury unleashed. In the pros, I don't know, there were several big hits. Bo Jackson and I, one time, we were playing the Raiders, and they ran a play, and you maybe heard of it. They ran it against Brian Bosworth back in the day.
Oh, yes.
And Bo trucked him and went 90 yards to the house.
I've seen that.
Yeah, well, they wanted to run that one on me, because we actually played them the week after they had done that to Bosworth.
Mm-hmm.
And so they tried it, and what it is they block everybody but the linebacker, and then they tell Bo, all right, here's the ball, just go run that guy over, and it's just that easy. Well, Bo came flying up there, and I came flying up there, and we hit, and we kind of fell backwards, sideways a little bit, but I stopped him for like 2 yards. Mm-hmm. And he jumped up and ran back to the huddle, and my guys pulled me up. They took the grass out of my face mask, and they turned me around, faced the right way. My other buddy made the call because I was still talking gibberish. And just about the time I kind of got my whole act back together, I realized they're going to run that same damn play. And they did. And Bo came running, and I come flying up. This time he hit me, and we hit, and I went on my back. And he stepped on my face, and that made him fall down. So it was a 3-yard gain. So now it's 3rd and 5, and they figured out that they can't do me like they did Bosworth.
Right.
And they brought in the nickel package, and I got to leave the field, thank God. And you know, my cobwebs cleared out of my head by the time I went back out there, and it was all good. But that's the one I remember most. That guy was a beast.
So, when you think about people that you've played against in the NFL, who's somebody that you played with or against in the NFL that you kind of like idolized, or you were like, wow, I can't believe I'm like talking or meeting this person right now?
You know, I really had a great respect. I never really felt that way necessarily. There were a couple guys that got your attention. John Elway, mm-hmm. When we played against him, I don't know that, I'm not saying he put the fear in us, but if you made a mistake, he was on it right now.
Right.
And just such a great competitor, and then what a great guy, you know. There were guys on my team that I had great respect for. Fred Smerlis, our nose tackle, was as good as it got when it came to football stuff. Joe Devlin, an offensive lineman. I had a lot of respect for Jim Kelly, too, because Jim, it didn't matter what he did it 100 miles an hour, whether it was partying, playing football, drinking Iron City beer, or whatever it was. Jim was always committed and in the moment, and he just loved life. And the way he did it, that was admirable.
So you're with the Bills, and you guys make it to the Super Bowl, correct? What's it like to play in the Super Bowl?
I don't know. It's mind blowing. It's better than anything you can even imagine. You know, I think back on it. You know, my first Super Bowl experience was Super Bowl 25, and that was when the Gulf War had just begun. And so we had helicopter gunships surrounding the stadium and hoping to prevent terrorism. And Whitney Houston sang that national anthem, and I think there wasn't a dry eye in the house. I know I was crying like a baby with all this stuff going on, and it was just so emotional. And then the jets flew over in the missing man formation, and it was. I had actually peaked emotionally twice before that game even started, when they introduced us initially. Yeah. And then when they did the national anthem, by the time the game started, I was freaking tired already. But it was a battle. And, you know, once you got going, it was football, but it was the most intense football you ever played, down after down. But I never succumbed to the temptation to just kind of go, oh wow, this is the Super Bowl, and freak myself out. Right, you're zeroed in and focused. I had to keep it right straight ahead. I'm playing football like I did since I was 7, and unfortunately it wasn't good enough. You know, in that game I made a tackle on Dave Meggett as they were driving late in the game, and forced him to kick a field goal. But on the hit, I had a mild concussion. I remember getting up and thinking, oh my God, it's the Super Bowl, and I can't even see straight. I got to get off the field. I can't hurt my team. So I started wobbling to the sidelines. And Doug Riesenberg, their offensive tackle, put his arm around my shoulder, and he's chewing on his mouthpiece, and he says, "Y'all's bench is over there." I was going to the wrong side to get off the field. So the whole finish is kind of a whirlwind. I still remember, though, everyone on the sideline holding hands as Scott Norwood lined up to kick a 47-yarder. We were down 20-19, 7 seconds left. We kick it, and we're Super Bowl champions. We miss it, and it's the worst moment of our lives. And it was wide right by about 2 feet. And I feel horrible for Scott because, you know, all indicators are he lost that game for us. But every guy on that team will tell you that they didn't play a perfect game, and the blame would equally be shared on them. And I think that, in large part, is how we were able to continue to pull ourselves up after such a humiliating loss, and get back to work, and then go to the Super Bowl again. Because we did it 4 times in a row. That'll never be done again.
Right. So, really quick, let's talk about your book. What's in this book?
This book is about Jack Driftwood. He's an old veteran linebacker. It's his last year. He knows it. Everybody knows it. The real reason he's brought back is they drafted another linebacker, number 1 overall, to replace him. It's set in Buffalo, and so a large part of the story follows the team from training camp to the Mega Bowl. And however, a lot of the story is off the field, where the owner of the team in Buffalo is getting a little older. He's worried about where the team's going to go when he's gone. He's got one child, a daughter. She's about 39 years old and has basically said no to the football deal. He convinces her to come back. And so she's being groomed to take over the team, and she falls in love with our linebacker. Well, there's a corrupt general manager who has been trying to steal the team from the old owner for years now. And so with the daughter on board, he thinks, I'll just marry the daughter and then get the team that way. And he blows a gasket when he finds out that one of his linebackers is dating the owner's daughter on the sly. So all hell breaks loose, and then it culminates in the end, and that's basically, without ruining the rest of the story, that's what this is about. All
right. Well, Ray, thank you very much for coming. It's been nice talking to you. This is Our City Live from Keene, New Hampshire.